Hi, my name is Louise Larson. I run August Consulting and I help families on the road to college. And this is my February webinar. And this month, yeah, I'm a little late to the game. I last week ran away from me and I said, oh, Saturday's the first, and I can make this recording on the first. And then I didn't have internet. So it's kind of interesting to spend a whole weekend with no internet. Good in many ways. Amazing how dependent we are on it by actual need sometimes, but just lifestyle and want. And boy, so it was eye-opening, but I am, because of that, a little bit late. This is it's February 3rd. So I try to get these done by the first at the latest, and I'm a little late this month. So anyway, that's where we are. So what I usually do news and notes, just all sorts of little tidbits and goings on in college admissions. My goal is to kind of water it down to a manageable thing for families on what's going on. And then I usually present on a specific topic. And this month, after news and notes, I'm going to talk about um, rigor and enrollment credit, everything from dual enrollment to AP and IB, how to think about it, what to know, what are they? So I'm going to talk about news and notes first, and then I'll dig into how these dual credentials might work and what to know about them. So here we go. So to kick it off, we are within the 90-day mark of depositing. So if you know a senior, they have to deposit by May 1st. So today's February 3rd, we are under the 90-day mark for depositing. So if you have a senior, you will know in 3 months where you're going. So that's kind of exciting. If you have a senior or know a senior, many schools will present an accepted students day where they can come for a really in-depth visit and learn more about the school. Those fill up. So if you have a senior and you're trying to figure out when you can go, don't dally because you could get shut out of certain dates. And I'm not going to tell you if it definitely happened to me or not, but it might have happened to my family who got shut out of dates. So go ahead and get signed up for those if you are have a senior. The FAFSA rollout after the debacle last year, the FAFSA has been going very smoothly. I've heard very little about it. I've had families tell me it went really well. It went so well, they weren't even sure they had really completed it. So kudos to whoever got that turned around, whether it was the guy that came over from the College Board or the Department of Education, I don't know who, but and they're so confident in what they've done that they are reverting the rollout for next year to October 1st. The date for the FAFSA opening was always October 1st. In the past 2 years, it's been a little sideways, but they're going back to October 1st. So if you have a junior this year, you will fill out your FAFSA with your 24 return. So that'll open October 1st. Next up, in that same vein, I'm going to talk about paying for college a little bit. Some just notes and things that I've been reading and listening to. The cost of college has risen 2 to 3 times past the rate of inflation for the past 25 years. And that is more than any parent can expect to earn with increases in their own income. So if you feel frustrated about college costs, your ability to save, don't be too hard on yourself. Jeff Salingo, I was listening to him or reading something he did, and he was saying that there's an issue, and he has a new book coming out in May, I believe. I think he wrote Who Gets In and Why a couple years ago, and he has a new book out, something along the lines of like college for the rest of us. Like, how do you do this if you're just kind of a more regular person? Anyway, he said less parents are willing to pay full room, board, and tuition outside of the most selective schools. And I was speaking to a friend who is just paying their final eighth semester of tuition at a very expensive liberal arts school for their fourth child. And they said it was $45,000 for this last semester. And, they were just happy to see that, look at that in the rearview mirror. So if you have an upcoming or rising, junior or senior, you could easily be looking at $370,000 for Bachelor of Arts. If you had, if you could, if you could also probably get a Bachelor of Arts if you applied to schools with merit scholarships or looked at some public schools for about $200,000. If you have $370,000 sitting in the bank earning interest and you pay $25,000 every 6 months for another semester at a $50,000 a year school, your student is going to graduate with a lot of money in the bank. So if a kid just had the money sitting there, and I had a family about 2 years ago say to me, the grandparent left enough money in an account sitting in cash for this kid to go to a very expensive school if they chose to, or they can choose not to and keep money. So it's harder and harder for families to not say, well, even if I have the money sitting there, it's pretty attractive to maybe look at something more economical. In that same vein, I was talking to another parent I know, and this is a dad with a PhD in economics. So his two kids they opted to go to very expensive liberal arts colleges. And he said, okay, but there's going to be a plan here in place. And the plan was that they would become resident assistants and RA for sophomore, junior, and senior year. That tends to cover all room and board, which can be a lot. It can be fifteen to $20,000 a year per school. So these students had to do that for 3 years and they wouldn't have any debt, or they were going to borrow that money. So this dad, who was a very mindful of economics because he is an economist, said, here's how we're going to do this. We're not going to just, go to these schools and not have a little bit of a plan in place for you to contribute. I talked about this book. I finally finished this book. It was a little bit slow going. It's called Burdened Student Debt in the Making of an American Crisis by Ryan Liebenthal. It came out the past 6 months. It was a little bit slow going for me. And I realized part of the reason it was slow going is it is very policy based. It's more like a history of how student debt came to be. And, if you really like policy, it's a fine book. But I wondered, because this book came out a couple of years ago, The Debt Trap, How Student Loans Became a National Catastrophe by Josh Mitchell. And Josh Mitchell writes for the Wall Street Journal. And so of the two, Burdened is a fine book. And if you really want to just know more about this, you can read about this. But this is not going to help you make decisions maybe as a parent so much as this one will. This one really, The Debt Trap by Josh Mitchell, really illuminates the whole situation and might help you make better decisions. So recently I had a family reach out to me that I just know personally. And they have a child going to college and another one coming up. And they were trying to get their head around, how does the funding, who gets what? Am I eligible for a Pell Grant, or what does this look like for me? And I sent them The Debt Trap. And I sent them The Price You Pay for College by Ron Lieber. And I share that just to say, if you're trying to get your head around how all this works, what am I looking at? This is the right way. Those are the two that I would recommend. I really feel that you would have a good primer on how colleges will evaluate your ability to pay. So, and the other statistic I will share from all of that is from 1995 to 2019, the full pay per population went from 50% to 26%. So less and less people are paying full pay. And the other statistic that just kind of came out that I thought it was interesting was only 52% of high school graduates go to college. And many of the families I work with are in high school communities that are very collegiate going. So the idea that only 52% of students are going to college was kind of eye-opening. So let's see. This past month, my juniors have been really, like some of my juniors I've been working with since eighth or ninth grade. So we've had meetings and we know each other and we're doing stuff. But, now it's like, okay, we are underway. So I've been getting my juniors moving forward and bringing on some new juniors and getting them moving. I had this kid that he's a senior, and last summer, as we were going, progressing through applications, and in the application process, there's a lot of false summits. We're getting closer, but there's still more. And he said in one meeting, he's like, "There's just always something else, isn't there?" I'm like, "Yeah, there's always something else." And then some stuff came up for applications that this kid submitted, and he's got to do some stuff. And like in January, he's like, "There's always something else." And I was like, "Yeah, there's always something else." So, um, as you look at colleges, one of the things to be aware of is, are there cuts in programs? Um, One of the ways to do this is to like put in the college's name and Google like the college name and cuts and hit news and see. It's good to know what that might look like. And you might see big headlines on cuts where you're like, oh my goodness, they're cutting programs. This is going to be okay. And sometimes it really might impact your student in a way that you might rethink that school a little bit. Sometimes it's more like they're cutting, their German literature programs undersubscribed. UBM did this a couple years ago, and like people, there's just this outcry. But like one of the programs they were cutting was like Latin American studies. And I'm like, if you really want to study Latin American studies, maybe like northern Vermont on the Canadian border, maybe there's better places to do that. So, sometimes there's a big outcry about cuts, but when you look more closely, you're like, okay, this isn't that going to impact undergraduate education that much. But sometimes it might if they're, you know, cramming kids in three into doubles, making doubles into triples, or cutting, making classes bigger. So you have to really look at that. Um, this next thought is not really connected to anything, but I was watching Michaela Schifrin is a U.S. alpine ski racer. If you're not in that world, maybe you don't know who she is, but a lot of people know who she is. And she is the greatest skier in the history of skiing, male or female right now. And if you ask any male on the World Cup circuit, oh, Schifrin, she's just a legend. And I think she's only 28 or 29. And I was watching her YouTube series she put out. Now she is indisputably the greatest. And she talked about her anxiety recently about imposter syndrome. And I was like, my gosh, how can Michaela Schifrin have imposter syndrome? And I share that to say, here we have someone who is, indisputably the greatest, and she has imposter syndrome. So I share that to think about our young people in this process and how just, it's hard, and imposter syndrome can get all of us, and just being aware of when you're a 16, 17, 18-year-old coming into this world, just how stressful it can be. Um, so I heard something on it was a webinar or a presentation, and it really was a little bit maddening. It was an admissions person from an ultra selective school with a single digit admit rate. And they were talking about bringing in new admissions officers and getting them up to speed on our admissions thresholds. And it really made my blood boil, because if you go to an admissions presentation at a really selective school, they will say it's holistic. We're going to evaluate you completely. And, you should, basically they're saying anybody has a chance, you should apply, you don't know. And I thought, wow, why don't you just make your admissions thresholds public? Because then you can maybe save kids a lot of heartache. But if they made their admissions thresholds public, maybe kids wouldn't apply and they wouldn't be as selective and they'd get less applications. And so I just really felt like, wow, I have never heard an admissions representative say a threshold out loud. And to be fair, they might, say, well, it's not a fast threshold because if you had like a Peruvian harpist from North Dakota, you might bypass test scores for that student. Like this person who's just bringing such a niche experience to your campus, you might say, well, we don't need test scores from them, or we'll waive the fact that it didn't take calculus. But I really felt like I was just maddened. I was like, let's make the thresholds public so kids know, like, unless I am really unique in some way, I'm probably not, this might not be viable for me. There was something else I was going to share about that. Oh, in that same vein, 43% of white Harvard students, the 43% of the white Harvard students are either athletes, legacies, development cases, or staff faculty children. And I thought that was also kind of a stunning statistic because that like is almost half the white students at Harvard. So if you are just kind of a general kid that has a strong profile thinking I've got a shot at Harvard, well, it's probably less than you thought. Um, AI. I have talked about AI. I don't think kids should be using AI to write their essays. I think it loses a bit of just the zest and energy that might make a writing piece be more authentic and gripping. I think it's a big mistake. AI, some admissions offices are starting to run AI, running essays through AI checkers to see if they're from AI. But the other thing that I heard that was very interesting, schools are starting to use AI to determine retention. And one school had 120 data points that they were looking at of like seniors who were progressing towards graduation and what it looked like when they came in. Because really what colleges want, they want students that are going to come and be successful and graduate on time and contribute on their campus. So using AI to determine what were the hallmarks of students who progressed in 4 years and how do we bring in more of those students? So that was interesting. The California wildfires brought, a question to light for families um, about distance and natural disasters, pandemics, whatever it might be. And I saw this several years in a row with Miami. Just I happened to have kids at the University of Miami where like from like the fall of 2017 on, like the kids that went to Miami in August, and then like by the middle of September, they were home for a couple weeks for hurricanes. So wherever your child's going, wherever you live, and wherever your child is considering going to college, what might your plan be if there is a natural disaster? It's something to keep in mind because, be it, I mean, California students were certainly impacted. Hurricanes can, be something, and an earthquake could be something. So having just a little bit of a plan around natural disasters, something just to think about. University of Miami and Claremont McKenna colleges have announced that they're going back to requiring test scores. I think there is a whole host of schools that are like at a tipping point, and that might come sooner than later this cycle for the class of 26. I think that there's a couple schools kind of coiled and poised to maybe ready to go that way, ready to require scores. The other thing, let's see, is there anything else? The past couple weeks have had a lot of decisions come out from the early action round of schools. Schools, Michigan, UVA, Ohio State, Northeastern, Rutgers have all come out. And so it's definitely been a little bit of a scramble. I had a kid text me 6 decisions, 2 yeses, 2 deferrals, and 2 nos. And it really kind of left me shaking my head. I'm like, well, okay, like there we are. So that's been interesting. And I think that in that vein, Rutgers. Now I'm in New Jersey, so Rutgers is our state flagship where I am, and many kids have never been interested in going there. And part of that is because New Jersey is kind of a small state, so you can't, they want to like, go away. And Rutgers doesn't offer that. So in their mind. So what has happened 2 years ago, Rutgers got 40,000 applications. And then last year for the class of 2024, they went onto the Common App and they got, I believe, 66,000 applications. So they went from 40 to 66. This year they went to 78,000. Now, if you're in New Jersey, you're like, oh, Rutgers might take it for granted. But if you think about Rutgers from an outsider's perspective, you've got big football, you've got access to New York City, you're adjacent to Newark Airport, so it's pretty easy to get to. And if you're from another state and you don't qualify for need-based aid and you don't want to pay $370,000 for your Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science, you could maybe go there for a fair amount less. So Rutgers is like Cinderella no more. They are at the table. I had kids deferred from Rutgers this year that 2 years ago they would have been honors college. And so Rutgers, you see a big shift. In that same vein, and I wonder if some of the kids, everybody, the New Jersey kids who just take Rutgers for granted, I wonder a little bit if they are going to start thinking, oh, maybe if they can't get in, maybe they'll want to go. I don't know, that scarcity might bring it more into vogue with the students that I work with in New Jersey. University of California has increased their California student requirement to 84%, 84.2% actually. So that means they need to take, they need to bring in 84.2% of their freshman class as California residents. So those will get increasingly more selective, I think. All right, one last thing in that same field of like public schools and enrollment, Texas A&M brought in the fall of 2023 a student undergraduate body of 76,633 students. So they are bringing in a freshman class of about 19,000, give or take. That was up 11% over 5 years prior. And from 2013 to 2023, they added 18,000 students. And they have reached a level of capacity that they have capped this year's freshman enrollment at 15,000. So they're going from maybe 18 to 19,000 to 15,000. That's a big drop. So if you were thinking, oh, I'm looking at the data from a year or two ago in Texas A&M, I look like I'm in profile for them and I really want to go there and I think it's going to be great. They have, an in-state enrollment cap. They take the top 10% of Texas ranked students. If you're in the top 10% of your class in Texas, you have automatic admit. They're cutting their class to 15,000. So again, you're going to see a harder admit at Texas A&M. So anyway, on that, I will leave you with I will leave you on a positive note. This is just, I know there's a lot of selective schools, but think about this. There are only 33 colleges that accept less than 10% of the applicants. There are only 36 colleges that accept 11 to 20% of the applicants, and only 35 that accept 21 to 30% of the applicants. Everybody else is over 30%. So that is 71. So 104 schools in the country accept less than 30% of the applicants. So there's plenty of colleges if you're willing to look beyond that. All right, so now what I want to do is talk about what are courses that allow you to get college credit in high school. What does that look like? And how do you do it? What are the pros and cons of the different plans? So there are essentially 4 different ways to do this. The first one would be dual credit. Dual credit is where you would go to the college, a local college near you, community college, four-year college, or potentially do it online, where you are taking your course at that college. Your work is graded by the professor at that college. And that's the course that you took, and you would have a transcript from that college. Dual enrollment is where you take a course at your high school that is approved, that is a curriculum that is approved for your teacher at your high school to teach you, and you would get high school credit and be eligible for college credit, and you would potentially have a transcript from that college. This tends to be a college. It's often, it doesn't have to be, it could be a college in your geographic vicinity. I have a kid that has in New York State. She has the opportunity to take courses with dual credit, with dual enrollment at Delphi, Hofstra, and St. John's. So it could be multiple colleges. Syracuse University runs the super program. It's a Syracuse University Project Advance or Project Accelerate or something. They run all sorts of courses that are dual enrollment. So that would be at your school, and you would opt to do it. AP, Advanced Placement, are courses that are a curriculum from the College Board that you would take a test on in May. You would get the scores in July. They score 1 through 5, 5 being the highest. Typically, a 4 or a 5 might get you college credit. Occasionally a 3, once in a while. A 3 could get you college credit. IB is from the International Baccalaureate program, and International Baccalaureate offers several options. One is the IB, the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program, the IBDP. That is the gold standard. That is probably the highest rigor you can put on a high school transcript for college. The IB diploma is, there's nothing higher than that. The IB program also offers a certificate. And then they also offer, you could potentially be at a school that offers the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program that you are not in, but you do take IB level courses. IB level courses run on 2 different tiers. There's standard level, rarely gets college credit. There's higher level, which IB is scored on a 1 through 7, 7 being the highest, 5, 6, and 7 on an HL course. I'm sorry, IB has SL and HL, standard level or higher level. HL, 5, 6, or 7 will often get you college credit. So that's what the options are. The pros and cons of each, and I'll start with the dual credit and the dual enrollment. So one of the challenges with dual credit and dual enrollment is that you often have to decide the fall you take them if you're going to take them for credit. And by that I mean you are going to pay to take them. And so I often get calls from kids like in the beginning of October, like, should I take the course for credit or not? And this is tricky because in that fall, you don't know where you're going to college. So you don't know, like, oh, this school will take the Syracuse University program credits, or I'm taking the Rutgers composition course and I'm actually going to Rutgers, so they'll take that credit. So what happens is you don't know where you're going. So you don't know if the credits are going to be worth anything to you. So one of my questions is always, well, how much are the credits? Sometimes the credits are like $150 a credit. And it's like, okay, you know what? You're taking a 3 credit class for $150. I might spin the wheel. But sometimes they're charging you like $700 a credit. And, taking a $2,100 course when you have no idea if the school you go to will give you any credit for that. That's one of my questions is how much is it? And usually it is pretty definitive. Usually they're a fair amount and it's like, I don't know. Or they're fairly modest in cost. And I say, why not maybe have that as an option? So that's the challenge of the dual enrollment or the dual credit. You really have no way of knowing. You're spending the money before you can see if they'll be of any use to you. That said, those programs do offer rigor. So when you're trying to put together your 11th and 12th, maybe even your 10th grade curriculum, and you're trying to layer on rigor, dual enrollment and dual credit are a good way to do it. Dual credit can also be a way to continue your progression if your school doesn't offer, say, the higher level math you need or a higher level language or whatever it might be. If you wanted to take a more advanced French class or multivariable calculus and your school doesn't have it, dual credit might be a way to do that. But either way, both those programs would be a way to show rigor and step up and say, I'm here, I'm serious, I mean it. Um, Advanced placement is is probably, I would say AP and IB are going, if you had to choose and you say, I just want rigor, should I do dual enrollment or AP slash IB? I would say AP and IB offer, maybe are seen as more rigorous than dual enrollment. Um, AP, um, you're going to take the test in May and you're going to get the answer of your scores in July. And when you do that, you'll be able to see, especially if you're a senior, you'll know where you're going. You'll be able to see right away, okay, I get credit, I don't get credit. I feel like the AP is easier to get credit than IB because you just need a 3, 4, you just need a 4 or 5 or occasionally a 3 in any course, and that's it. You've got the credit. IB, it has to be HL, and you have to have a 5, 6, or 7, and those can be a little harder to get. So, International Baccalaureate will show a lot of rigor, and some schools offer both, where you can take AP courses or IB courses. If you had a choice, a lot of the IB-HL courses run over 2 years, so you might take IB English HL over 11th and 12th grade. You could, in theory, take AP Language and AP Literature and maybe get more credit than you would taking IBHL. So I've heard it said that AP is better for kind of college credit. IB is better for your long-term college preparation. So here is, when you think about these globally, they factor in to course selection. And I have a lot of kids doing course selection right now, and they're trying to make good decisions around what will stretch and challenge them and add rigor to their high school coursework and what that looks like. They don't want to completely sink themselves either in getting in over their head. So it's a balancing act. The other piece of the puzzle is when students are making decisions around money, when you factor on the graduation side, what do you have in IB credit? What do you have in AP credit? Will the school you're going to give you credit for that? Will they give you anything for the dual enrollment work that you've done? If you took 2 APs your junior year and got 4s and 5s on them, and you were taking 3 your senior year, and you were like, okay, they're going pretty well, I'm reasonably, hopefully I can get, a couple more 4s and 5s. If you were to get 2 4s or 5s your senior year, all of a sudden you essentially have a semester of credit, which when you go to look at schools, when you go to lay out what are my costs, I really love this one school, but it costs more. But that school I could actually get through in 7 semesters. Maybe it isn't as expensive as I thought it was. The IB diploma, I've seen schools that give you a full year of credit for that. And that can mean going in as what they call a first year sophomore. So you are in your first year, but you are starting as a sophomore. If you have a merit scholarship at that school, you could, in theory, those are typically for 4 years. If you maintain your GPA, you could start a master's. So these decisions, you have to see what your school offers, and some schools offer all of it. I mean, all of it. And some schools have more tailored or smaller offerings of this. So it becomes very important around course selection, but to also take a long look senior spring, if you're comparing offers and really looking at cost, what it might look like for you if you get some good credit from AP or IB. I've seen students cut a semester off. I've seen students maybe just have to take a lighter course load. I had an engineering kid come back to me and say, you know, I graduated on time and I never had to take an 18 credit semester in my engineering major because I had 17 credits for my B. The other thing to think about, and there's no right or wrong choices here, but if you were to come in with a lot of AP credit, and maybe you took AP biology or AP BC calculus BC, you know, are you ready to go into Calc 3? Should you skip college level biology? I don't know. Part of that comes down to the student where they say, you know what? I really did love AP statistics, but I feel like I need more. So some of the decision making about how you enroll in college and potentially use or not use these credits also comes down to your knowledge base, because you might argue like taking a course in 11th grade. I mean, some kids take, an advanced AP chemistry or biology in 11th grade, and then they're pre-med and they're like, wait, maybe I should do this at college. So there's a lot to think about. And there's a lot of abbreviations, IB, AP, DE, and you start to say, well, what is all this stuff? So I hope I have kind of brought it into focus and some of the things to think about, because these become very personal situations for your family. If you are just, have the good fortune to be a full pay family, or your kid got a great scholarship and you don't have to think about cost, that's great. But if it could factor into a family who's trying to, sort out cost. And the other piece of the puzzle is, do you take advantage of those? I'll tell you what, the more selective the school, the less credit you will receive. And that's just kind of a rule of thumb. I had a mother years ago. She was at a selective school, but not like the most selective school. And she had this really smart IB diploma kid who went on to get a PhD. And the school said, if you have an IB diploma, we will waive you out of prerequisite courses. And this mother was like, what do these people think? I'm stupid? Like they're going to waive prerequisites for an IB diploma? Like, I don't think so. So, the other thing, if I was really coordinated, I think if I start to show my screen, I'm going to just have some technological glitch. But all you've got to do is Google, any school, Kenyon College, APIB credit, and a table will pop up and you can see some schools might give you like, if you took BC calculus, they might give you like 8 credits. Some schools might give you, for like a certain amount of language, of a world language, 3 credits. So that's how you access this. It's very easy to access. So if your kid got a couple APs or IBs or took some dual enrollment in junior year, you could almost start to pencil out like, wow, how much do we have? Some kids have a lot after their junior year. Some kids don't. And there's some states, like Washington State has the Running Start program, or if you're in Washington State, a lot of high achieving students in Washington State do Running Start, where they leave high school with about an associate's. They do their last 2 years through their local community college, and those Washington State schools are very familiar with that. And especially the public ones, you come right in and you're essentially a junior. A school on the East Coast, private liberal arts college, might not be quite so generous. So anyway, I'll stop talking, because otherwise I think I'm just going to make it, clear as mud. So sorry for the delay. I will get this up as soon as I can, and I will be back in March. And please reach out if you have any questions.